Well, today's an adventure. We've got our 2022 Tesla Model X Plaid, and we're pulling a 5,000 pound, 23-foot trailer. Let's see what it does to range and what the experience is like. Now, the Model X Plaid has plenty of torque and horsepower to tow. Really, the big question on my mind and probably everyone else's is how does it actually impact range? The first comment I'm gonna make, the mirrors and cameras aren't quite set up ideally for a trailer, at least not one of this size.
How many miles can you go with that? With towing?
About 200.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's not too bad.
That's pretty dope, bro. Have a good one.
Thanks, man. You too. That's interesting. I already had my first just random person pull up next to us and ask how many miles of range you can get with towing this. And so I'd like to be able to give those sort of answers out. Now, by default on the factory, this has 343 miles of range. With the 22-inch wheels, it knocks it down to 308. Now, what's it gonna get with the trailer and 5,000 pounds of aerodynamic drag on the back? We'll see, but that's the entire question we're asking here. The setup and actually hooking up the trailer, really straightforward and simple. There's actually an icon right on the dash. As soon as you plug in the 7-pin power connector into the back of the vehicle, it enables trailer mode. That turns off the rear ultrasonic sensors, so they're not continuously saying that you're getting ready to run into an object. It also makes some changes to the adaptive air suspension to help keep the vehicle flat. It does also disable autopilot, at least on city streets. That's kind of to be expected as well. The vehicle can't see how long the trailer is, so it'd be fairly unsafe for it to automatically try to switch lanes, for example. Now, anyone that's driven the refreshed Model X Plaid or Model S Plaid, one of the very first things you notice is how strong the regenerative braking is. And that's really a result of having 3 permanent magnet motors. I've noticed so far that you can even one pedal drive with a 5,000 pound trailer on the back, which is pretty crazy. You obviously need to give yourself a little bit more stopping distance, but it's possible. Now, when I picked the trailer up, the very first thing the owner asked me is, this thing can actually tow? And I think that's really the rumor that I want to dispel here, is that, yeah, these vehicles, they have plenty of power, they can absolutely tow. I think the lingering question is how far? You almost forget that you have a trailer on the back of this. It has so much torque and horsepower that it really, other than a few little tugs and pulls here and there, you wouldn't really know that you've got 5,000 pounds on the back. And in fact, I'm pretty sure I can still out-accelerate most vehicles on the road, even though I'm pulling this crazy amount of weight. All right, this is the first time on the highway. We're getting up to speed, and we're gonna go ahead and merge. So far, so good. I was hoping that basic autopilot would at least kick in on the highway, but no luck. We're stuck with actually manually driving our car like some kind of monster. Now, on the highway, you can really start to feel the aerodynamic drag of pulling a massive trailer. You can feel it kind of tugging on the back. You know, I'm taking it pretty easy here. We're gonna keep it to about 60 miles an hour. And for the most part, it's still really smooth. You can tell when there's a gust of wind or something, or you get a little tug on the back of the vehicle, that there's clearly something there, but it's not bad, and it's definitely not a bad driving experience overall. The vehicle seems to handle it really well. All right, we're pulling up to our first stop, and after 10 miles of driving, we've used 15 miles of range, which actually isn't that bad. I expected closer to double the range, but you know, obviously we're gonna do a couple of different runs through some mountains and a little bit longer duration and see how it shakes out, but so far, not so bad. And one thing people often overlook if you're camping or pulling a trailer with an EV is that most of the campsites that you're going to be going to have an RV hookup. So they've got a 30 amp circuit for level 2 charging. You can also oftentimes, which is what we've done here, we know we're going to be here for 3 days, so we're using a level 1 charger. We're just plugging directly into the RV and using one of the 110 outlet. It only gives us 4 miles an hour of charging speed, but that's plenty when we're going to be here for 2 or 3 days to get a full charge. Now, otherwise, if you have the Tesla mobile connector, you can swap out these ends. This has the 110 outlet right now on it, But you can swap this out for a NEMA 1450, which is a typical dryer outlet, or you can go with the RV connector as well. They're modular, you can pick them up on the Tesla website, and it's pretty easy. Now we did overall have about a 700 watt hour per mile usage coming up here, so that's gonna drain the battery about twice as fast as just normal driving. It's not too bad though, considering we came all the way up into the mountains and we drove through a mountain pass and a canyon. Now on the way back down, we're gonna be regenerative braking and recharging almost the entire way, so I expect that watt hour per mile to kind of equalize over the course of the trip. All right, so here's some of my observations after about 100 miles of towing this big beast behind us. There are a couple things to keep in mind. I think EVs in general, once battery technology catches up and the batteries are large enough, there isn't going to be anything better at towing than an electric vehicle. And it's pretty obvious the reasons why. It has gobs of torque. I can literally, it doesn't even feel like I am pulling this trailer at all. If I didn't know it was behind me, I wouldn't know I'm pulling it. Getting onto an on-ramp, merging, anything like that, really it's effortless. You still feel like you can accelerate faster than most vehicles on the road, which you probably can, and it just isn't a problem whatsoever. Now, on the road out there, we drove up the canyon, and it's about a 5,000 foot elevation gain. It's pretty steep, windy roads. The car handled that with no problem. Suspension was great. You can set the air suspension so it's a little bit stiffer, so you can kind of carve through those twisties a little bit, as much as you can with a trailer on the back. Now, I did not take it easy on this test. I didn't try to drive slow. Other than like safely driving with the trailer behind me, I didn't try to extend the range more than you typically would. So the vehicle's been in Plaid mode the entire time, so you have the full 1,020 horsepower and 1,000 something foot-pounds of torque. And on the road up there, we used about 750 watt hours per mile. So about double what you would expect normally driving up something like that. So the battery range is about cut in half. That's pretty on par with what you expect out of a gas vehicle as well. So that gives us a total range, if we had the 20-inch wheels on here, 172 miles. Not bad. And the interesting thing is, on the way back down that same mountain pass, we regened the entire way down. So we actually only used 1 mile of range for about the first 3/4 of the trip, the first 20-30 miles. That was interesting for a number of reasons. We actually did have a notice come on the dashboard that regen had been reduced. And I don't know if that's because the battery pack was too warm or too cold. So all told, on the route home, we used just over 400 watt hours per mile, which honestly, that's about what I would expect from that trip out of my 2021 Tesla Model X performance that we had before this. Now, of course, we would have done better than that efficiency-wise had we not had the trailer behind us, simply because we wouldn't have been pulling that additional weight. So I think this, again, probably doubled that watt hour per mile that you can expect on that trip. Now, the one thing we didn't do during this whole thing was supercharge. That would have been a little bit more interesting because some of the superchargers have a pull-through station where you can actually pull through with a trailer on. Otherwise, you've got to kind of pull off to the side, disconnect, charge, and then reconnect, which, depending on how quick you are, can take, an additional probably 15 minutes, which you don't really want to spend. Overall, I gotta say, I'm incredibly impressed with this vehicle. It pulled this effortlessly, no big deal. I think the sweet spot for my family and I, since we don't camp that often, would probably be a pull-behind pop-up trailer. That's gonna be much better on aerodynamic drag. It weighs about half as much, so I imagine it's not gonna have nearly the range impact that this did. But, honestly, just for a weekend trip where you're not going too terribly far, this was totally fine. As always, hit me up in the comments down below if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.